Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
In a two-part special, TTR hosts Tom Rogers and Hannah Wilson talk to staff about strike action over alleged draconian procedures. Follow us at TT Radio Official to find out when part 2 is available. And now it's over to Tom.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. We are going to be discussing some important stuff today, notably a strike action which is currently ongoing at Longsands Academy. So a number of the staff from there are going to be joining us this evening to talk about their experiences, in particular their experiences of why they have decided to take this particular action at the school. We're going to have some representatives from the school, as well as hopefully you. If you want to call in, if you want to share your views this evening on this, then you absolutely, as always, can do so. You just have to click the little microphone icon in the bottom left-hand side to be able to speak, and then you can take part in the conversation today. And, you know, I think it would be remiss to not sort of introduce this just on a very basic level as to what we're going to be talking about today. There has been a strike action at a particular school over what staff claim are draconian policies. So things around the way in which staff and students are being asked to behave and being asked to go about their life in the school, I guess. And a number of staff, I think 50, have walked out on strike action due to this and have decided to take action based on this. And what we'd like to do today really is just find out a bit more. So we're hopefully going to be joined by Helen Brooke. Helen, if you want to just click the request icon in the bottom hand corner, there should be a microphone icon. If you can click that, and then we can bring you in. And the same applies to any of the other speakers joining us. I think we might have Peter here who might be a speaker. So you just need to click the microphone icon in the bottom left-hand side, and then we can hopefully get you all connected up. Just while we're waiting for that to happen, it would be good for me to name our sponsors and supporters at Teachers Talk Radio, who always support all of our shows here. We've got John Catt Educational, which we are always delighted to have on board. They are providers of professional development opportunities to teachers, usually in the form of books. And if you're interested in buying a book from John Catt, you just go to johncattbookshop.com. You can get 20% off any book from John Catt by using the code JCTTR2425, and you can get 20% off your order of any said book. We also are supported by Teaching How-Tos. They offer over 160 visual guides to support teaching and learning. If you aren't familiar with Teaching How-Tos, definitely give them a Google. This is about professional development communities. It's about teachers supporting teachers. It's about improving your own practice through coaching hubs and through interactive guides. You can visit teachinghowtos.com to find out more. We also have Reading Solutions. Again, they offered a free event last week for any teacher of English. If you want to sign up for that, just go to readingsolutionsuk.co.uk. It was a 3-day international reading conference. It was all online. Speakers like Michael Rosen, Basit Siddiqui, lots of others. You can still sign up for that for free, readingsolutions.co.uk. And finally, Apps for Good. If you haven't heard of Apps for Good, they offer free introductory computing courses to schools around the UK. So if you are interested in getting involved with that, then definitely visit them at appsforgood.org. They've got courses fully equipped and mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Now, Helen, just going to check that you can hear us okay, your end.
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. That's good news. And we've also got Hannah here, hopefully. Hannah, if you want to unmute yourself.
Good evening.
Excellent. Good news. So we can hopefully crack the conversation on, and I can just start to ask Helen a few questions. So, Helen, tell us a little bit about you first and your role.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak on this very important matter. I'm the local district and branch secretary of the National Education Union in Cambridgeshire, and there's been issues at Longsands School, where the strike was held yesterday and today, for quite a while. And we've been in long discussions with Astrea, who are the Academy Trust, to try and resolve some issues. But unfortunately, we were unable to reach agreement. And so NEU members went out on strike yesterday and today.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, because this is what's been reported in the media elsewhere, is that the tipping point for the strike action, this round of strike action, was this thing called the morning welcome. Now, we at Teachers Talk Radio have tweeted out earlier exactly what this is being reported as. It is as follows. Do correct me if I'm wrong on this. The morning welcome involves a whistle being blown at 8:37 a.m. All the children line up in straight lines in alphabetical order, facing forward in silence. A second whistle is then blown and they have to make sure they're in their lines. And if they're not standing correctly, they will be told off for it. If anyone is talking, they will get a detention. Messages and news from the academy are then spoken to the children. They then all have to turn in silence and then file to their form rooms one at a time. Is this what you're striking over?
It's a real sticking point. And Peter and Sam will be able to elaborate a bit more. But essentially, the morning welcome is a waste of everyone's time when it could be more usefully and purposefully spent either with the students in their form times, building relationships with those students, having departmental meetings, not teaching students to line up as you've just described. In that sort of, I was thinking, what sort of environment would you ordinarily have to line up in alphabetical order, in silence, in a straight line, facing forward? And the only real career I could think that you would do that in is if you went into the military or if you ended up in jail. And I do not understand, and we do not see how making children and forcing them to behave in that way is going to help them as lifelong learners. But the most important thing is that tutors and the teachers and staff at Longsands want to spend more time with the students in their class, in the pastoral care, and they're not being given that opportunity because Astrea will not budge on the morning welcome.
With fairness, though, Helen, we posted this out earlier on today, and we asked teachers for their thoughts, and a lot of those teachers have replied. So I'll give you some examples. Daniel said, "Sounds fine. I wouldn't strike over my school introducing a tighter routine to start the day. And if that's the sole reason for the strike, I'd be very dubious about the credibility of anybody who would." Another one. Not sure it would be so strict in my primary school classes. They line up in the playground at 8:40 a.m. There's a morning announcement and then walk silently to class with their teacher. Sets a calm start to the day. English teacher says it's not very welcoming, but it firmly sets expectations. I wouldn't strike. The detention for talking seems extreme, but if it's applied fairly and most importantly send students who find it hard to stand still or be quiet are treated appropriately, then I'd be okay with it. There's just a snapshot of some comments. What would you say to those teachers?
I would say if they could spare the time to walk a day in the shoes of the staff at Longsands and other Astrea Academy schools, then they might well change their minds. It's absolutely oppressive.
But focusing in on that particular, the morning welcome, I know that's not the sort of end of it. I know there's a lot more to it than that, but I do think it's an important point just to consider that as an illustration, because that's the point that's been reported. That was almost the point where you said, no, we are not compromising on the morning welcome. And all I'm saying is there are a lot of schools out there who seem to have similar, that aren't this particular academy chain. There's a lot of schools out there who have very similar morning routines.
No, I appreciate that. That's just one of the many issues that there were. But the children are made so miserable by it, and the staff don't like it either, but they're not allowed to have an opinion on it. It's coercive control. It's ruling through fear. If we think about, I've been a primary school teacher for 17 years. If you think about it, teaching about bullying, it's something that we all teach about. Bullying is identified as having what we call the 3 Ps. It's persistent, it's on purpose, and it's to have power. When you consider what Australia is making the students and adults do, they essentially are bullying.
Hi, Hannah here. I'm one of the other hosts. I'm just joining up because when he said he was doing this, I was like, I have recently moved to a school that does this. And to be honest, I was quite shocked when I started and kind of seeing it go. And my school does it almost to an extreme. We have the morning lineup, and then they do the same at break and lunchtime, and all the different year groups have different zones. And as soon as the bell goes, they go and line up. And it is that kind of, if it's done well, it is one of those, as a tutor, I can literally walk up and down the line and I've checked the uniform within 1 minute. All the notifications are read out to the whole year group. Whereas I found at my old school, I was quite often the only tutor kind of passing on those messages, and not all of the year group were getting the same message from tutors. So it kind of streamlined that. And I think it's when if a kid does talk, it is like the only ones that get detentions is kind of, I probably see it like maybe once a half term where there is persistent talking when the teachers are talking and that kind of thing. But the kids are in that routine of it, and then they are dismissed with their teachers. I do agree in the fact that it does seem to take quite a lot of time, especially the break and the lunch times. It takes out a bit of the day in the school. But for me, having never seen it before, and going into the school, which is a behaviour hub, so I know other schools do visit it, so it's potentially come from my direction, apologies. But it was, when I saw it, it was quite interesting. It was very quick to pick up on uniform infractions, and it just meant that wasn't then coming into my classroom either. So like I learned a few of the different kind of sides of it, having now been in it, that I wouldn't have seen beforehand. And I was just wondering whether you thought about any of those at all.
I just wonder if Sam or Peter would like to come in at this point, since they live this.
I was wondering if I could clear up some of the information about how Morning Welcome has come into the negotiation and the debate and the strike that we've had.
Please,
yeah, that'd be good.
Sam, please do.
Yeah. So Morning Welcome as a routine, like you say, it could be, I'm sure it can be managed as a positive thing. I would say within our school, the way it's been received, and it's been there for over 2 years now. It hasn't been received very well. I would say actually there is minimal sharing of key messages on it. But the reason it is in our negotiations as a union is actually more related to department and pastoral team briefing time. Going back through the years in school, it was very accepted that those groups, so within your department and within your pastoral tutor team, you needed meeting time within the week kind of directed and blocked out. And due to, Morning Welcome and a different slight change to the school day, it's meant that time was taken out of directed time and staff weren't given that time to communicate within those teams. And that was a change that lots of members said they found really problematic, because it made communication between staff much, much worse in the school. It meant that bringing in of new policies and stuff wasn't being disseminated well, and it meant that it wasn't running very well. So the reason Morning Welcome has been brought in as an issue is because it has been, its introduction has got in the way of those other essential briefings, and it was through the union trying to debate about bringing that time back for departments and pastoral teams to kind of communicate and share information effectively, that Morning Welcome has ended up as a topic of debate. It was kind of the only free time that we could create, and the school was not willing to back down on that, said, no, we think the students standing in those lines is more important than allowing staff adequate time to kind of communicate within their departments and their pastoral teams, which is what members disagreed with.
Yeah, because that's got to be, it can't be instead of, you still got to have all those things, and it's still got to flow, hasn't it? It's if it's done right, then it can be done well. But it is that kind of aspect of not taking away from your game time, because that's really important, especially with departments. So as my school, every department has 1 hour a week timetabled in where we're all kind of free to be able to talk to each other. So it is kind of works in that respect, because we still have that time. But if I completely understand if that's why, if you're losing your own time just to make these kids line up earlier, then that's a kind of a different aspect.
Yes, and that's where the kind of it's not worth that has come from. I would like to also add that this isn't the only issue that we've negotiated on this. One of the biggest issues hitting our school is, and we've raised this more than a year ago, is staff retention. Since last July, we've lost, I think, over 50. By the end of this year, we will have lost over 50 members of teaching staff within the school. So just as an illustration, like morning welcome being introduced on its own is not going to make that kind of change. What our strike is actually over and what our ballot was actually on was under the topic of adverse management practices, and that kind of comes under a few different things. And it's those practices of which not listening to staff feedback on what they need to do their jobs effectively, that's the issue that is driving staff out of the school at a point of national retention and recruitment crisis, which is what staff have questioned. And as reps, as a union, we've surveyed members on this quite extensively on what issues they are having in the school. We've taken that to management, and one bit of feedback we've had is, well, if you don't like it here, you should leave and go find a school where you do like it. And that's actually, it's a consequence. That is what we're seeing as a consequence, and that is damaging the school.
I think that's quite interesting. Like, that many member of staff to leave is so significant, and I guess like that's new and old, and a wide range of staff, and it's kind of those that are left are trying to improve it for the better. Because certainly, like when I've been doing currently my master's in senior leadership and understanding about kind of people management and talent management has been quite an interesting point that I don't think we see in schools done very well. And actually in a recruitment crisis that we are in at the moment, as much as they reckon they're going to get 6,500 new teachers in, that's going to take a while to come in, and they're not going to be the wealth of experience that you'd get of kind of teachers that are in that. And plus, if you are trying to recruit teachers that have been in the game a while, will spot the toxic kind of atmosphere within a school quite quickly. So you'll end up with quite a lot of maybe potentially new teachers that couldn't find jobs. And then you've got that kind of, if they're picking up on bad habits that are from SLT, then that's going to kind of spark a whole new set of problems. I'm curious though, especially with the morning line, are your children generally, because I know that there's been a national thing about kind of behaviour and how it's gone downhill since COVID, are you finding that are the children picking up on this as well?
Could I add a point to that? To be honest, I think the issue about the morning welcome is that if the community has accepted this as a way of going ahead and working in their schools, I don't think there's so much of an issue. But if your community is actually not accepting of that, it becomes increasingly difficult. So especially when we're not talking about primary school, we're talking about secondary school. So when you're talking about year 10s and year 11s who are being asked to line up, there can be quite a lot of resistance. And that idea of everybody being lined up and it's all neat and tidy is not often what happens in practice. I think the other thing that is really significant to understand about why we are in the position we are in at the moment, that is that we've been on strike, is we feel that throughout this year we have not had an adequate moment when we can be in meetings either with our departments or with our pastoral year groups. What that often means is that
Peter, sorry, can I just cut in with a question on that real quick? According to what I've read, that the morning welcome lasts for 5 minutes.
Yeah. I think what you need to understand is that the morning welcome is indicative of something. It's indicative of what is really a sanctions-based behaviour policy. So, for example, the Australia Ascent policy, basically students are supposed to work their way up this ladder. It begins with the way I behave is to avoid sanctions. That's the first step, and they've got to get past that step of I need to behave. There's this concept, it's sanctions based rather than just organizing behavior. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is in this last year, we've had one policy after another. And first of all, the teachers have not had time really to take any of those policies properly on board, because you suddenly, for example, we had one morning where we went into our pastoral meetings and were told, when you go out, we will be the head of year will hold their hand up, all the teachers will hold their hand up, and the students will hold their hand up. Well, you can imagine it. We were told 2 minutes before we went out into the playground, and nobody understood what was going on. Actually, quite a lot of students and teachers felt like the whole connotations of everybody holding their arms up was maybe...
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
Something to be questioned. The point was there was no consultation with staff. And this is, again, it's indicative of the way this school has behaved. Its management processes are basically, we will tell you at the last minute so that you don't get a chance, first of all, to actually take it on board. And secondly, to actually have a conversation with the management about how this would happen, whether it's the right way to go. They have not taken staff with them. And in the end, whether there are schools where this does work or whether there are schools where it doesn't work, the idea that in a recruitment crisis, you have lost half of your staff. And when I say that, I mean staff who've been in the school for 16 years, 17 years, they've lost middle leaders. When you're dealing with that situation, then you have to look a little bit past if something as simple as morning welcome is only 5 minutes. This occurs in lesson time, incredibly strict policies. Students must be sitting up straight. They have to have their arms folded. Very, 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 very strict policies throughout. And we feel in general that it isn't good for all of our students. And certainly it isn't appropriate for a lot of our SEND students.
Do you think, though, Peter, because the reason I asked that is earlier, Helen and Sam had both mentioned that the key part of that was this not being able to have the departmental time. So that's, I know you're now talking about the sanction system, but, I think that they said the point with that morning welcome was particularly about the time it was taking. I would also say that from our line of questioning, we by the way, at Teachers Talk Radio, are not in favour or not in favour of your strike action. We are just trying to ask the question that maybe other teachers would ask from the outside about it. So one question I had as well was that the Academy have argued that the morning welcome would be a better way to disseminate information across the whole school than to 50 different form tutors who then disseminate that information out. So
the problem is, I think at the moment what the Academy is doing is they are trying to insist that this is all about morning welcome. And what we are trying to say is, no, there's a lot more to the particular situation that we've been involved in the school over this year, more than a year. It's more than morning welcome. What they're trying to do is they're trying to say, oh, it's just one issue and it's only 5 minutes. We're trying to get it out to the public that, no, it's not about that. Honestly, if it were just 5 minutes of morning welcome, would you be losing half of your staff?
Can I focus, and anyone feel free to jump in on this, because I appreciate that some of you may have more knowledge of this than others, etc. But you mentioned these 50 staff who have left. What percentage of those staff just decided to leave? And what percentage didn't decide to leave, if that makes any sense?
Well, we can deal with data, and in Cambridgeshire, the average numbers of staff that would leave in any given year is about 14%. It's a little bit higher than that, I would say. And again, one of the things that the school has been trying to do is to say, people are leaving because they relocate, and people are leaving because they've got a promotion. Honestly, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And what we're talking about is the data, the numbers. You can always find a teacher who may be moving elsewhere. You can always find two teachers who may be moving elsewhere. The numbers of staff that are leaving shows you that it is something more serious than just people moving on.
Could I jump in on that as well, actually? Because with the NEU as reps, we have done our best to conduct exit surveys with members of staff who are leaving, because again, just to be able to draw patterns across why members of staff are choosing to leave is really useful. And on that, a huge majority of them cite issues with leadership and not feeling like they are being treated as a professional with professional knowledge of how to teach and how to manage students and how to work in that environment as their reasons for leaving. They do not feel supported in doing their job or treated with dignity as a professional and given agency to carry out their job as they understand how to do it. I'd like to could I just really quickly also add, because again, just to push Pete's point about this isn't the one issue that has happened this year, is that what you've got to understand also is that our members balloted for strike action in about January of this year. We were all set to go on strike in around March. That strike action was averted because of an agreement written up between both teaching unions and the school. And another very important reason as to why we are on strike or have been on strike over the last 2 days is because that agreement has been repeatedly broken and not stuck to by leadership. There was a part in there that said that any changes to people's job roles or that were affecting people's kind of working conditions or responsibilities had to be consulted with affected members and the union before those things were put in place. Now, that has been broken I think at least 7 documented times since March. There's a clause in there about the leadership have decided to change the way we carry out our year 11 and 13 mocks, saying they have to do a full suite of GCSE exams in February, which staff have had to raise the issue that, well, we're not even done teaching the content at that point and stuff. And they said, oh, well, that's what we have to do across the entire trust, so that's what we're going to do. One of the articles in the agreement was to run a quantitative workload assessment on what that marking increase at that point in the year looks like, and that has not been done since March. They've had that much time, and we're still battling for these things that supposedly were agreed to happen to avoid strike action in March.
Just coming back, and I'm going to pass on to Hannah in a minute, but my final question in this little bit is, what would you like instead? I mean, just focusing on the behaviour side, because again, I can't speak for the academy. I've never worked there. I don't know anything about them. But let's imagine that an academy chain takes over a school or becomes involved in a school because the behaviour is bad, because the standards aren't very good, and there's lots of issues there. Now, I don't know if that's the case at your school. I don't know whether it was excellent.
That is not the case at our school.
Okay.
All Ofsteds prior to Australia taking over, behaviour was judged as good. So,
okay. In that case,
or in the most recent ones, certainly. So, no, there have been claims from Australia that behaviour used to be bad at Longsands, and that's why they've had to do things. But I would say that most members that we have would strongly disagree with that.
And can I ask what it is? What would you like instead of this approach? Because it's sort of all well and good saying this approach is terrible, it's draconian, etc. But what is it you want instead? And can you give me some specific examples?
It's very difficult to say what you would like instead in this sense, that what we currently have is we have a whole range of things that we have to do. So, for example, there has to be a moment when you do a discussion moment, for example, we've got very, very specific phrases that we have to use. We have to have a do now thing as students arrive. We have to, if they're going to speak, we have to use a timer and we have to say turn and talk. We have very, very specific language which we are supposed to use. In the corridors, again, we have very, very prescriptive language which we are supposed to use. I think the argument is that it's not that we believe that none of these things are appropriate. We all know that TLAC is something that is around in schools at the moment. We all believe that they can be useful tools for certain teachers. I think the issue is that there's this emphasis that these are the tools that we're going to use in the school. And when we say you're going to use them, we mean you're going to use them. And if you don't, then we will be walking around and we will possibly start to put you on some kind of a notice, because it's not that your teaching isn't very good. Your teaching may be absolutely brilliant, but if you're not following this policy, then we will start to consider that you're not doing things correctly. That's the issue. It's a very difficult thing to ask us to suddenly say, right, we want this, we want this, we want this. What we want is what we used to have, which is basically, a policy behaviour, absolutely a policy for behaviour, but that within all of that, there is an element of flexibility. What we've got at the moment is we've just got incredibly prescriptive policies. That's the problem.
And could I also add to that? Sorry. Because Hannah mentioned this earlier when she was talking about her school, I think. The idea that, kind of allowances are made for students with SEND needs, that, it's recognised they're not going to be able to follow that same behaviour policy in the morning lineup. I do not feel like, personally, there is enough of an allowance being made for these things. I'm, talking about the rapid change of policies. A couple of years ago, we came in for the first day of September and told we were going to be following this thing called STAR, where when students were told they had to have nothing in their hands, and they had to maintain eye contact with the teacher when on command. And at that point, I raised the issue that, some students with maybe ADHD are going to struggle to sit there and pay attention without anything in their hands. And some students with ASD might struggle to rigidly maintain eye contact with somebody while they're talking to them. And I was told, we'll make allowances for that. But that's never happened as such. And actually, there was a data analysis of our school done a while ago for Education Uncovered, where it showed that I think it was something like 41% of the students who are in isolation due to behaviour issues or suspended are those who are pupil premium, and something like 39% have kind of registered SEND needs. So that's something that I think needs to happen. This one-size-fits-all approach to behaviour doesn't work and is really negatively impacting a lot of students.
Can I ask though, Sam, on that? Why do you think it should, on the issue of behaviour, rules, expectations, boundaries, etc., why do you think they should be less for pupil premium students?
I think a lot of those were actually due to lack of equipment. They were getting after-school detentions due to turning up to school without a pen, and therefore they were receiving detentions, and that was escalating.
Can I come in there, Tom? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can hear you.
I find this all very interesting. Because me and Paul covered Pengate on Thursday, and actually my school gives out equipment, so every kid gets 3 black pens, 2 purple pens, a pencil and a ruler that is checked every morning in tutor time, and they are just given and replenished. Now granted, that does mean that some kids don't necessarily respect the equipment, but also means that they are never without, so therefore they never get that detention unless they lose it between period 1 and 5, which is generally does happen, but not as often, and it will just be a mark. And in terms of my school, it does very much sound like your leaders have come in and looked at my school and gone, oh yeah, we'll do that, and not necessarily implemented it well, because we have an SRB for autistic children. So everything in our school is very much adjusted to them, and so that they are nice, quiet, calm classrooms for them to come in, but they have a space to go to if they can't cope with that. But they also kind of like the routine. But then there are some that spend the time in the SLB and will come to lessons separately, so they're not in that situation if they can't deal with the lineup. So there is kind of all of that. But my school also does the hands up. And I've never been in a school that does that. And it is like teacher puts the hands up, all the kids put the hands up, everyone's silent, then the teacher gives the announcements. And that goes throughout the school. The only exception is our year 11, which they sit in a separate area, but they instead of lines, they do get to sit down. They have chairs. It's their privilege of being year 11, but they sit in alphabetical order from day dot of being there. So when they go into their exams, every single child knows exactly what order they go into for their GCSE exams. And it's quite it's impressive to watch. I was like, I've never even thought of that. But there's literally, they're so used to sitting next to those people and being in those lines. It's quite an interesting concept that I'd never kind of really considered before I kind of went to this school. But definitely the hands up was kind of new to me. The slant, kind of the sit up straight, pens out of your hand, looking at me. Like I do find that's taken me a lot of adjusting to, but it will be basically we're all allowed a kind of our own versions of it. So it's very much sit up straight, look at me, make sure you've got nothing on your hand. It's just making sure they're really understanding the instructions and all paying attention when we're saying it. But it is very much how you present it, isn't it? I think, as opposed to being told this is what we're going to do. Whereas my school very much taught me very much how to do it. We've just had our year 6 transition days, and every kind of break and lunchtime there's multiple practices of it. They even said, like, when the year 6 come up, it's more about making sure they know the routines of when they come to school and how we line up and how we don't talk when teachers are talking. And it's more about them learning the routine than it is necessarily the lessons. So I found that quite interesting. But it very much sounds like they've gone, this is what you're doing, and they've not brought in the reasons we're doing it and the justifications and the how we're going to implement it and at which stage they've kind of, it's that thing of bad implementation is when you give people too many things to do without the time to kind of adequately get there and with no kind of justification for it.
I mean, to be fair, just to say before anyone else comes in there, that we haven't got anybody from Astria here, so we don't have anybody to talk for the school. We can only base on the comments they've made publicly through media, so we can't really suggest that's anything that is happening. We don't know. And equally, thank you to Helen and Peter and Sam for coming on and sharing your should we say take or experiences or anything what's happening. So I think that's important as well. But it's just important to caveat with we don't have anyone from the school here. Sorry, carry on.
Sure, yeah, I was just going to say...
I'll let them stick to it. But I guess I was kind of brought in to be... Because I was like, everything they're saying is kind of what my school does. So I'm just kind of being the counterproductive person of kind of what it can look like. But it is... like I felt very uncomfortable at the start of it and kind of get... And I'm still not used to it. And I've not been at the school very long. And it is that kind of... is seeing it... The bits that I completely agree with and bits that I have really, really struggled with. But also, like, the kids are some of the most well-behaved kids I've ever seen in a school and so polite. But it is drilled into them. And I'm like, how much of that do you want it to be natural that they're polite? Or how much is it that we actually do really have to teach kids to be polite? I don't know. But it's really interesting to hear both sides. But I think very much it sounds like how teachers are kind of involved in the conversation, how to get teachers on side and how to kind of talk and understand it, because you can't just add. This is the whole thing of the isn't it, if anyone's out there done an MPQ, you'll have heard it all. Like, you can't add to teachers' workload. You've got to understand where, and you've got to take something away. Like, you've got to balance it out. You can't just kind of take things and just expect or pile on stuff and expect it to happen. Like, it just sounds like the whole process isn't, it's just that they've seen it and gone, oh yeah, we'll do that, and not really understanding everything behind it.
Yeah, could I just respond to that, Anna? Because I think one of the things that has happened is, and one of the things that we've had an issue with... I
don't know whether that changes anybody's opinion on it or not, or whether if there's bits that people are really worried about, I'm happy to like chat and say like which bits I do like, which bits I don't like. It's just interesting. But I think it has to be. It's about culture, isn't it? And I think that's the thing in teaching as well, is an SLT can really make or break a culture within a school, and quite quickly. And I think was it I've been subbing in for education tonight. I'm talking about them far too much. We had the kind head teacher on a few weeks ago, and that was really interesting, kind of hearing that perspective. And it's made me realise that there isn't a space in education for these kind of SLT that dictate and kind of talk down to teachers and don't listen to their opinion and don't value their opinion, because there are head teachers out there that can do it right and treat teachers and make you feel valued. And it very much feels like this school and these teachers have not had that experience in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, including, I think the issue is, I think there's a general sense of, look, we give you a behaviour policy and then I don't know
if any of you want to speak, like, but is there a way to...
They are speaking, you can't hear them speak. So that's why.
Okay, sorry.
Go on.
I think the one of the issues that there's been, and one of the things we've got on our list of problems in the school, was the pace of change. So suddenly, one week after another, there's a new aspect to the behaviour policy. Then there's another one. Then there's another one. Then there's another one. Well, I'm an experienced teacher, and it's a bit like when you're trying to learn to drive. When you first start to learn to drive, everything's going too quick and you can't really get your head around things. But even as an experienced teacher, it was a bit hard to follow one new policy after another new policy, after another new policy, after another new policy. And I think there's a misunderstanding that inexperienced teachers, if you give them this tool, they could just use the tool and everything will be fine. And actually, teaching is not like that. It's more like driving in London traffic, teaching, and there are certain policies which support you. There are routines that support you, but just throwing one after another, and really just insisting you have to do this, and doing learning walk and making notes if you're not doing it, and then sending you information saying you're not doing this properly, is not the right way to go about implementing that kind of change. They have not taken staff with them. That's the problem, and it isn't just as I say, TLAC is everywhere, and I think most teachers would maybe use little bits of it, maybe. But the idea that you just enforce it in what was actually quite a not draconian for students, but also draconian for teachers. A lot of teachers felt hounded out. So we had teachers leaving at Christmas. We had something like 12, 13 teachers leave at Christmas. That's unheard of. Where you then had another 4 people leave at Easter. Unheard of. So I think deep down, I think we've got to kind of get away from it's just about morning welcome, and it's just about these tiny things. It's a much, much bigger issue about treatment of staff.
Apologies for talking over you guys earlier. My thing glitched, but yeah, it very much sounds like that they're not doing it. It's not a team effort. It's not bringing you guys along, especially if you feel like you're observed and watched and criticised. I think that can be very much a thing of, are you encouraging teachers and building teachers and making them better teachers, or are you criticising and then knocking them down? It's a very different way of kind of talent management.
Yeah, I'll say one of the things we had to kind of challenge as a union earlier in the academic year was this thing was brought in called the Light Touch Support Programme, which was, what Peter's saying, kind of very short, as in 30 seconds to maybe 3 minutes at the most, lesson walks which were being used as observations. And if people were seen kind of, I don't know, you're using mini whiteboards, but if you're not using them in the way that was described in a CPD session that was held that week, then you were kind of noted down and put on a support program, which if you didn't show that you'd improved it, then you'd be put, there was a threat of capability and things like that. So it wasn't bringing staff with them. It was telling people, you are going to do this and we're going to watch you. And if we see you getting it wrong, we're going to punish you for that.
Watch our socials at TT Radio Official to find out when part 2 of this programme is available.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.